Good afternoon, and welcome to the White House. My name is Macon Phillips. I'm the Director of New Media here, and we're really excited. We've had a big day today. Earlier this morning, Vivek Kundra, the federal CIO, announced a new site up in New York that has the promise of bringing in a whole new level of transparency and accountability in government. And we have been spending all day talking to people about the site, explaining what it's all about, and we're really excited now to be able to take that directly to you. So why don't you give everybody sort of an overview of what you talked about this morning, and then I'll start asking some questions.
Great. So we talked about a new website called usaspending.gov, and we fundamentally changed the way we're approaching technology investments. This new platform, for the first time now, enables everybody, the American people, to actually be the watchdogs, the auditors, and the innovators when it comes to looking at how the United States government is spending billions of dollars in information technology. What's really exciting, though, is that we recognize that the United States government does not have a monopoly on the best ideas. And we want to make sure that we're able to tap into the ingenuity of the people like you who are out there. And it's also based on something that President Obama did when he was senator. There was a bill called the Obama-Coburn Act, which drove transparency into spending across the federal government. What this site is doing now is we're taking it to the next level. We're setting a whole new foundation when it comes to transparency, responsibility, and accountability. And we've been working very closely also with Senator Harper, who's been a champion of making sure that we have greater transparency and accountability when it comes to the $70+ billion IT portfolio. We encourage you to visit the website and help us find innovative ways in how we can change the way we're spending money on information technology, and also help us find the third way.
Okay, great. Okay, guys, so start your questions. I'm following everybody. It seems like the feed's working. The first question that I've got, though, I'm not quite sure if I understand correctly, so I'm just going to read it out loud. It's from Timothy, who asks, will Exhibit 53 and 300 be tied to contracts data? Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. So Timothy, if you go to the data feeds section of the website, what you'll notice is that we've provided the Exhibit 53 and the 300, so you actually have the raw data. But more importantly, if you go to any of the departments, pick USDA, for example, if you click down on the investment itself, what you'll notice is you can get a profile of a specific investment, and there's data around prime contractors. And you can see specifically which prime contractor is working on a specific IT initiative, but you can also see how the CIO is rating that initiative, how it's performing when it comes to cost, schedule, and whether it's actually meeting the performance objectives that were promised up front when funding was appropriated.
Great. Okay, so just in case we didn't say this at the top of the presentation here, but the URL, if you want to check out the site and you haven't had a chance to yet, is it.usaspending.gov. Yep. So one of the questions that we've been getting all day that would be good to sort of help off the bat is, you have projects rated by well-performing and behind milestones. How do you actually get that data, and how do you make sure that data is accurate?
Sure. So what we've done is, for the first time now, it used to be that agencies would report data on an annual basis on the health of their IT project. And on a quarterly basis, essentially most of them would tell you that it was more of a paperwork exercise. It would be a cut and paste. What we've done now is we've moved the needle in terms of reporting so that it actually happens on a monthly basis. So every 30 days, agencies are going to be reporting around cost, around schedule, and also the rating of the CIO. And CIOs are going to be evaluating these investments on a number of areas. And if you actually click on the CIO rating, you'll see specifically what those factors are. They involve everything from the performance of the project to requirements definition, to making sure that there's an active risk log, to making sure that people are getting, in terms of milestones, they're meeting those deadlines. And that composite index allows you to get both the quantitative side of the health of a project, which is cost and schedule, but also the qualitative side of a project, because you want to make sure that you have the ability to factor in the judgment and the experience of the CIO as they evaluate the investment. It may all be fine in terms of cost and schedule, but there may be huge issues when it comes to maybe it's the wrong project, or there's an X factor that no one is thinking about, and we want to make sure that you're getting the full picture.
Great. So can you also touch on a little bit about, within the site, the different tools that are available for sharing data and for matching that data up, and what it means to have feeds and what it means for that community?
There are a couple of guiding principles here. A core part of what we've done here is we've made sure that across the board on the site that there's a share button, and you could share that chart or the expenditure or the project itself with anybody in an online way. So the ability to be able to organize online and follow certain IT projects, or actually follow certain agencies, departments' interests, is enabled through this sharing capability. So whether you're on Facebook or on Twitter or Delicious, any of the social networking platforms, you'll be able to take that data. Secondly, through the data feeds, what we've done is we've democratized the data that underlies this performance. And you'll be able to take that data and slice and dice and cube it and mash it up in different ways. You could actually get XML feeds from the platform itself, and you could design your own online community that follows how a project is performing. We've also provided tools around analysis that allow you to do comparative analysis. You can actually see what happens to Homeland Security when it's actually aggregated or created, and what happens when it comes to IT investments versus Department of Education. So all those tools are designed to allow you to be able to provide us with the feedback in terms of how we move forward and make smarter decisions, and enables you to actually be the watchdog, the auditor, and the innovator when it comes to how we're spending your money.
Okay, so you guys might have just seen a quick switcheroo while he was answering. We had some tech difficulties with the first computer, but now I have one that's working. Let's just, I think we've touched on this a little bit, but it's our first question. Bob Drake asks, who audits the reporters to make sure they're not fudging the numbers? And how do you do this without creating another bureaucracy?
Great question. The way that the reporters are audited, there are a couple of levels. Of course, you already have currently the inspector generals who act as independent entities that look at the reporting itself. Also, when the CIOs roll up that information, the Office of Management and Budget has the ability to look at that data and make sure that it's not fudged. But most importantly, for the first time now, the American people will be able to also see this. They'll be able to see the data, they'll be able to see the reporting, and through the feedback mechanisms, they would be able to provide us with anonymous feedback, especially if you know of IT initiatives that are in trouble. We would welcome that feedback. As a matter of fact, we encourage that through this platform. So
a follow-up to that is from Brian and Joan. I guess that's 2 for 1. What will the timeline be for CIOs to rate projects? Many are not yet rated.
Sure. So if you look at the front of the website, the home page, what you'll notice is at the lower right-hand corner, there's a number. And that number reflects how many investments have been rated. And if you click on there, you'll actually see which agencies actually went out there and rated their projects versus those that didn't. They have 30 days from today to go out there and make sure they've rated every single project. But what's great about this is we have visibility into who is rating them and who is not rating those investments.
Great. And then Paul asks, how do you define IT? Like, what's the scope of these projects?
And that's a question that agencies have been working on for decades. And the challenge there is, consider this, for an organization like NASA, where do you draw that line? Is it the ground system? Is it the space systems? Right now, the agencies are defining what IT investments equate to, and they're also defining in terms of what the major investments are that need to be monitored across the board. But as a principle, when we look at operations of agencies, network infrastructure, data centers, security, applications, especially those that serve a mission of the agencies, fall into that category.
Great. And we had a comment from Megan. who said she isn't scared to admit that she doesn't have a really specific idea of what we're talking about here. I mean, this is really in the weeds of technology. So maybe you could take a step back and explain to people who might understand different contract vehicles and whatnot. Why does this matter to the American citizen, the American taxpayer?
The reason it's important is, especially in this tough economic time, it's very important that the government spend money wisely. And President Obama has led in terms of when it comes to transparency and open government, especially with the Obama-Coburn Act. If you go, for example, to usaspending.gov and you type on search any word, you'll be able to actually see how your taxpayer dollars are being spent. But more important than that is to be able to make sure that as we make this information available publicly, that in the public square, we can have a discussion around how we make our government better. How do we make sure that our government is serving you? And how do we make sure that we're not spending money that doesn't yield the benefits that were promised? How do we make sure that taxpayer dollars are spent on projects and initiatives that actually produce the dividends we're looking for? And how do we make sure that we don't continue on a path in Washington for far too long where billions of dollars are spent, yet nothing comes out of those initiatives?
Okay, Regan Davis asks, what are the plans timeline for adding increased commenting, ratings, and citizen interaction?
So one of the things we're going to be doing right away within a week is we're going to be incorporating a blog that would allow people to give us feedback. Immediately, you could actually do that on the feedback page, where we can get feedback on a project level or overall on the site itself. But the idea here is we've launched it in beta. This is version 1.0, and we're looking to people like you to help us evolve this platform. We're looking for suggestions in terms of what features would be useful, how we make information available visually, what would add the greatest benefit, and also in terms of online organizing, what can we do to make it easier for you to organize, to hold us accountable?
Okay, and we've got we've received a couple comments in the last few minutes. The URL again is it.usaspending.gov. And so Kathy has a pretty simple question. Will it list what percentage of our tax money is going into this? How does it break out the various investments? And maybe you could go through a little bit of how you can drill in on the different agencies all the way down to the specific projects.
Sure. So right now, if you go to the main website, the usaspending.gov website, you can see the entire United States budget. And you could see the percentages also in terms of how money is allocated in different areas. Once you look at that $70+ billion portfolio of IT investments across the federal government, you're actually able to drill down not only at a project level, but if you go to the analysis tab, what you'll notice is you could drill down to service areas. You could see how much money we're spending on service to citizens, how much we're spending on healthcare, how much we're spending on defense, how much we're spending on energy. So part of this platform enables the easy utility of visualization tools to be able to drill down to where you could see percentages. And actually on the analysis tab, you'll be able to look at the percentages, and the percentages change depending on what you click on. So you could see how much money we're spending, not overall, but also on specific areas around defense and energy and so forth.
Okay, so we have two questions that are related. Joe Wilson asks, do you think that the American people are qualified to make value judgments on government IT programs? To which I think it's Pavithra follows up, how does all of these IT projects fit into the existing planning? And I guess the larger question is, you're asking a lot of people to send in feedback. How is it going to be received, and what's the impact of this project on the people inside government that are making these decisions?
If you look at the history of the United States, we've gone through major transformations. It used to be that Jefferson and Adams were separated by vast distance during the founding of the Republic itself, that they would send letters, and it wouldn't take minutes or hours, but it would take days or weeks to communicate. Then came various revolutions from agricultural to industrial, to where transportation infrastructure was developed further. So we started with letters and telegrams and emails. Across each of those revolutions, what we recognized was that government had to change, it had to adapt. Today, you can email whether it's your representative or government officials. And in the same way now, when we enter this Web 2.0 world, this digital world, we're going to have to make a lot of changes on our end, on the government side. For the first time, Macon is here in terms of new media, and he's tried a lot of really neat and innovative things, and he's pushing the envelope in terms of making sure that the White House is on Facebook and Twitter and SlideShare, among many, many other networks. In the same way, agencies across the federal government are going to have to make the appropriate investments to transform themselves to be able to not just deal with the Web 2.0 world, the digital world, but to be able to thrive and to serve you in this new reality.
Okay, well, they're coming in fast and furious now. So this question was actually asked, and then somebody else said they'd like to answer too. First was from Doug, and then also from Roger. What keeps usaspending.gov and recovery.gov from being redundant if they both track how our tax dollars are being spent? Can you sort of explain a little bit about how this site is different than recovery.gov?
Sure. So recovery.gov is focused primarily on the the ARRA Act, the Recovery Act itself. And it only tracks the $787 billion, whereas usaspending.gov tracks all funding across the federal government, including contracts and grants. It's much broader in scope. The recovery.gov is run by the Recovery Board, and usaspending.gov is run by the administration to track all funding that's associated with the budget itself. Now, what we're doing is we're making sure that as we make investments, whether it's on recovery.gov or on usaspending.gov, that we can cross-fertilize and leverage those assets so that we simplify it and make it easy for people to access that information. But recovery.gov also is going to have the ability to be able to track funding at the recipient level to make sure that recovery dollars that are being spent, we're able to track all the way down to every person who's receiving money when it comes to spending.
Okay. Mariana has a question. Are there any security fears in regard to exposing all this information? Can you talk a little bit about what's on here, what's not, and just some concerns along those lines?
Absolutely. When we embark on this journey towards transparency and lay a new foundation for transparency itself, we have to be mindful that there are certain things that can't be released due to national security reasons. And we have to be mindful of the data that we release, and the quality of that data also can impact certain markets. And it's very important that as the United States government releases information, that there's a balance between radical transparency and making sure that we're not compromising national security in any way. So you're absolutely right that there's definitely a balance that we have to strike between the two.
Okay. Kathy Heath has a question. Who will really look at our feedback? What is the level of personnel who will see this before the president looks at the good stuff? How much middle management is being used to analyze data before the president gets his hands onto it? I guess the question is, where does this feedback go?
So the feedback is actually going directly to the CIOs of various agencies, and also to the Office of Management and Budget. But we're going to launch the blog that will allow the public to also see what type of feedback is coming in into this platform itself, so that we could jointly together evolve this platform from version 1.0 in beta, where we are today, to version 2.0 and further. Okay.
Regan, she corrected my pronunciation, asks, right now, a lot of these dollar figures exist in a vacuum to the citizen. Is there historical or past comparisons that might be added to measure against?
Absolutely, and actually there is some data already. If you look at the analysis tab that looks at enacted budgets going way back to 2001, and allows you to see the comparative analysis between agency expenditures and also comparative analysis when it comes to specific spending around whether it's infrastructure or steady state spending. But we want to make sure as we put more and more data online that part of what we accomplish is the ability to analyze and slice and dice data in many different ways.
Okay. Bob Gorley has a question. I'm wondering, how can we scale this incredible capacity to other mission areas in the Fed space and outside the Fed government?
So part of what we've begun on is to roll out this platform. It's the first step to drive the government to become more transparent and open. And we've got a number of other initiatives like recovery.gov already. We've got Open for Questions, the Open Government Initiative that make up this composite profile of what the president is trying to accomplish, to create a more open and transparent government. As we embark on this journey, we're going to uncover inevitably a number of issues. And what we want to do is with version 1.0 is to look at what's happening in this space so we can scale it across the government. And the administration is committed to making sure that we're driving transparency across the whole government.
Okay, we got a question from Carl, and I know you have some experience with this from your last job, but how will the administration encourage the private sector to use this data to build applications that drive innovation and accountability?
So this fits in very nicely with another initiative we have called data.gov. On data.gov, what we've done is we've democratized data on every aspect of government operations. Everything from FAA flight times to EPA's toxic waste plans to what's happening in health and human services. What happens is when you democratize data, you build a platform where the private sector, the NGO community, the American people can all innovate and create useful applications to serve the public. If you looked at what the Sunlight Foundation did, it actually launched a competition as soon as we launched data.gov, and already you can see a number of applications. One of those applications I actually used today, which was flight times, and it lets you know the average flight times, delays, and also on-time flights and which ones to pick so you could make more intelligent decisions. So in the same way, think about what you could possibly do when you start marrying various data sets. The dream here is to have somebody, a grad student, at 3 in the morning looking at various data sets, and at the intersection of those data sets, they found value. Just like in life, true value lies at the intersection of multiple disciplines, whether that's mathematics and music or psychology and art. In the same way, we believe that by democratizing this data, we can innovate and create whole new markets like the DoD did when it released data around satellites. It created a whole GPS industry to the point where we don't even think about it when we use our iPhones or maps.
Okay, Monique asks a question. Is the site going to go into enough detail to be truly transparent? So maybe talk a little bit about how you define transparency and when you're looking at this level of detail.
So I'll answer that with a question. If every 30 days you know the milestone of every project and where it stands, you know whether they're on schedule or not, you know how much money an agency has spent, and you know what the CIO thinks about that investment, you know who has a prime contract, and also what the GAO, the IGs think about that, and making all that information available to you moves us in that direction. And what we want to do ultimately is get as close to real time as possible as we get more and more data, not just on a monthly basis, but on a real-time basis. But that's going to take time. It's going to take changing the way we collect information. But this is the first step, looking at it, changing the frequency of data collection from an annual to quarterly now to monthly basis.
Okay. Chris asked a pretty good question. If a program is failing, do you, your office, have the authority to fire those people? And if not, what are the outcomes here that will actually come from this participation?
What we're looking for is to make those sensible decisions around saying, well, wait a second, if a program is 10 years behind schedule, millions of dollars over budget, does it make sense at all to continue to plow more money into this? And those are the types of decisions we're going to be making based on this new platform. And based on the feedback we also get from you, is the ability to look at this project and decide which projects do we want to divest from and which projects do we want to invest in. Because we want to make sure that we move capital to where it's being most effective and where it's adding the greatest value.
Okay. This is a pretty good one from Stephen Balcom. He asks, what's the single most important thing you learned from your DC experience that you'd like to repeat nationally?
The most important experience, of course, is when you democratize data, when you engage the American people and you begin with the assumption that you do not have a monopoly on the best ideas, what you'll realize is innovation will be driven, and the government needs to reject the self-image that it cannot innovate. By making this information available and by engaging the American people, we together can drive and create a government and move it towards good governance, move it towards a government that actually creates value, delivers projects and initiatives on time, and ultimately serves the American people.
Okay, getting a couple of questions. Just got one from Nina who asks, how are you going to make this data understandable to the average citizen, yet maintaining a clear overview?
We're actually going to present it in multiple ways. That's part of what we want to do, is for those people that want to be able to take the data and have the ability to slice and dice and program and create neat visualization platforms, they're going to be able to use it in the raw format. We're also going to be creating charts, and we're going to be creating rich visualization platforms like we have with the analysis page that will allow a person who doesn't want to spend the time or isn't interested in programming to be able to use that information. And lastly, we're making sure that we're using plain language so that people can understand what it is that we're accomplishing on the website itself.
Okay, Thomas Moore asks one that sort of touches on a lot of things that we've been talking about here at the White House. How will data.gov, and I think the dashboard as well, help healthcare initiatives?
So part of what Director Orszag talks about is the ability to run comparative analysis. Looking at, for example, how much does a hip replacement in Washington cost versus Boston versus Oklahoma City versus San Francisco. And making that data available and making that information available over time will allow us to run those type of comparative analysis that are not available today and move much more towards evidence-based medicine.
Great. And so Timothy Yini asks, and this is our last question, unless we get one more squeeze in here. I'm looking at the data feeds and the key linkages are missing, contract numbers, vendor names, all this sort of stuff. Will you add these critical keys to the data in the near future? And maybe you can talk a little bit about data quality and where we're starting and where we're trying to go.
Sure. So with data quality, one of the big challenges, of course, is you've got a federal government that spends over $70 billion on information technology. And at the same time, it has over 10,000 plus systems. So one of the things we're doing is we're trying to make sure through this process, as we get feedback from you, we look at the data itself. Right before we went live, we asked all the CIOs and agencies to submit the data. And we recognized that the closer we got to going live, there are more and more changes to the data because data quality was improving because we were shining light on those processes. And what we're going to accomplish over time is we're going to see the data quality improve. Is it perfect right now? Absolutely not. Is it going to get better? Absolutely. And as more and more people look at the website, as we use it to make decisions around public policy and investments, we're going to see the data improve significantly.
Okay, well, that's our last question for this chat about the dashboard. And want to thank you for your time to come here and answer questions and participate in our little experiment here. And thank everybody out there for participating. And stay tuned at our Facebook page, facebook.com/WhiteHouse. And so you're aware of the next one of these that we do.
Great, thank you.